Well, good afternoon to you. 406 here, News Talk 105.9 WMAL, where we're making sense of the news. Coming up, 4:30, Dr. Carol Swain is with us, the scholar who had her work stolen by the current president of Harvard. She'll react to the news of that this week, what she makes of it. We've also got Chris Shandovel joining us, an attorney from Alliance Defending Freedom. A big victory for free speech and religious liberty today in Virginia. He'll share that with us. And Kash Patel joins us, former deputy assistant to President Trump, at 5:30. And we'll take a closer look at Congress's decision today to extend government abuse of your liberties, surveillance powers extended for the United States federal government that they've been abusing for years. Hundreds of thousands of Americans spied on without a warrant at all. Kash Patel reacts to that. And you can join us at 888-630-9625, 888-630-WMAL. All right, well, I'm going to get to Jill Biden's ridiculous Christmas video in a moment. But first, let me concentrate on what else is happening with the Biden family. Yesterday, the House did vote to formalize the impeachment inquiry, which, let me repeat, is not actually that big of a difference. Because Kevin McCarthy, when he was Speaker of the House, he put this thing in place without a floor vote. He had 3 committees get going on this, right? Already, Judiciary, Oversight, and Ways and Means. The respective heads of those committees were already leading the investigation here, and it was already called an impeachment inquiry. Yesterday's vote was merely to have the House give it a thumbs up, which they did yesterday. They said, sure, you're great. So they formalized the impeachment inquiry. So not a huge change, but it is what it is. And so they claim that it's going to give them some additional powers when they try and compel people to appear for subpoenas and go before courts when they're wrestling documents away. They say this gives them more heft, whatever that'll mean. So we'll see there. But the reality here is that it's well-deserved. An actual impeachment is very well-deserved for Joe, certainly for the way he's conducted himself as president of the United States, certainly for all the ways he's failed us, certainly for the active betrayal of our border, the death of hundreds of thousands of Americans that's ensued as a result. Pick any number of scandals. There's a big list available to you that would justify this. In fact, just yesterday, we saw the news that Hunter Biden refused to testify to Congress, which is a crime. When Congress sends you a subpoena, you have a legal obligation to appear. If you fail to appear, you're committing a crime, so they can move to contempt of Congress and the Justice Department can pursue you. Of course, we don't expect the Biden Justice Department to do that. But the White House told us yesterday that Hunter had consulted Joe ahead of his remarks. So what does that mean? It means that the President of the United States was at the very least aware of, if not encouraging of, Hunter Biden breaking the law yesterday morning. Just yesterday morning. So Hunter added an additional criminal offense to his rap sheet with the assistance of his father, the President of the United States. Impeachable? I don't know. Apparently nothing is if your D is after your name. If Biden is at the end of your name. But Hunter was obstructing Congress. He was obstructing an official proceeding yesterday. No January 6 charges for him. And the media is still doing this routine where they say there's no evidence. These goons in the media who continue to say there's no evidence that Joe Biden is connected to Hunter Biden's business dealings. Well, first of all, these are Biden family business dealings. The whole family's in on it. Jim Biden, Joe Biden, Ashley Biden, the whole world of the Biden family is in on it. They're making a ton of money. There's plenty of evidence for that. Joe Biden has checks with his name on them that have been paid to his account. He was receiving direct payments from Biden family businesses on a monthly basis. And so when it comes to this story, there's a mountain of evidence. Let me just point you to, there's a great, one of my colleagues at the Daily Caller is a guy named James Lynch. You hear him on our show sometimes, but he wrote a piece not long ago, September of this year. It was headlined, "Here's all the evidence connecting Joe Biden to Hunter Biden's foreign business dealings." And there's a lot of it. Witness testimony, emails, text messages, flights, additional evidence all indicate that Joe Biden was knowledgeable about Hunter Biden's business dealings and communicated with his son's business associates on numerous occasions. Hunter Biden's former business associate, Devin Archer, testified in July to the Oversight Committee that Joe Biden, Joe, spoke with business associates more than 20 times, including a spring 2014 dinner with Russian oligarch Elena Baturina, who, would later not be included in a list of Russian oligarchs who were sanctioned during the Russia invasion of Ukraine. He also was at a spring 2015 dinner with Vadim Posarsky, an executive with Ukrainian energy firm Burisma Holdings. In addition, Archer mentioned a meeting that Joe Biden had in Beijing with a Chinese business associate. And then he later provided a college recommendation letter for the man's daughter as vice president of the United States. Hunter Biden was being paid more than $80,000 a month by Burisma while the dinner with Posarsky took place. Baturina wired $3.5 million to a shell company owned by Archer and Biden in February of 2014. Posarsky would email Hunter Biden in April of 2015, thanking Hunter for inviting him to D.C. and, quote, giving me an opportunity to meet your father and spend some time together. The Biden family and its associates have received more than $20 million from Ukrainian, Russian, Chinese, Romanian, Kazakhstani business associates, according to all of these bank records available to the public by September of this year. So that's just a small portion of the evidence. I could go on. This is a long article. There's a tremendous amount here that I could cite for you. That's only a small portion. But Biden is still lying about this to this very day. So here's Biden lying last week.
President Biden, on Ukraine and also China, there's polling by the Associated Press that shows that almost 70% of Americans, including 40% of Democrats, believe that you acted either illegally or unethically in regards to your family's business interests. Can you explain to the Americans, amid this impeachment inquiry, why you interacted with so many of your son and brother's foreign business associates?
I'm not going to comment on that. I did not, and it's just a bunch of lies.
You didn't interact with many of their business associates?
I did not. There's lies.
They're lies. I did not. They're lies. And of course he did. He did. That is a brazen lie. This is fact check false. Fact check false on Joe Biden. Quite obviously. That's not even a close call. That's not the kind of thing you can spin away. Hunter Biden yesterday, in explaining why he was defying a congressional subpoena, he insisted another lie. He said his father wasn't financially involved. He thinks that adding this caveat, apparently, is going to give him some distance is going to help, protect his father.
My father was not financially involved in my business, not as a practicing lawyer, not as a board member of Burisma, not in my partnership with a Chinese private businessman, not in my investments at home nor abroad, and certainly not as an artist.
Okay, so all of this adds up to, if you were a real reporter, all of this would add up to, I've got to ask the guy some questions. I've got to ask the big guy or his representative some questions about this. Biden obviously lied on television just last week. So let's confront him on that issue. Let's confront the White House. Well, CNN had their opportunity today. Ian Sams, who's a White House spokesman, who I believe at one point was Kamala Harris's spokesman. Ian Sams was on with CNN's Phil Mattingly, and it was a disaster. Now, Phil Mattingly did, to give him some tiny credit, did try and ask about this, but man, it was painful. It was very painful. This guy, Phil Mattingly, it was obvious, oh, I'm so sorry, I even have to ask.
In the statement that Hunter Biden made yesterday, he said, let me state as clearly as I can, my father was not financially involved in my business. He was unequivocal about that. But that is an evolution of where the president had been during the campaign, where the White House had been at the start of the administration. Not involved financially in the business is very different than never talked about the business, not been involved in the business at all. Was that an intentional point of clarity, do you think?
I actually dispute the whole premise of that question.
Why?
It's one of Jim Jordan's favorite little shiny objects, is to try to take a semantic thing and make an argument that is somehow far afield from what they're actually focused on.
I love that. Jim Jordan's favorite tactic is to listen to our words and hold us accountable for them.
We've been extremely clear over and over again for years, and nothing has changed. The president was not in business with his son, period. They're trying to make up all sorts of allegations and make up lies.
With respect, I'm not citing Jim Jordan here. I was in some of the White House press briefings where it was said explicitly the president did not talk to his son about business dealing. That is very clearly not the case, and I think the statement from the White House has changed, and I think been a little bit more precise over the course of the last several months.
How generous is this? Well, that very clearly is not the case. It very clearly was a lie. And the White House has now been more precise. Oh, you were muddling it before. You didn't give it to us with all the clarity it needed, but you fixed it. So didn't you get more precise? Didn't you improve it over time? CNN asks so ever so gingerly.
To his son about business dealing. That is very clearly not the case. And I think the statement from the White House has changed and I think been a little bit more precise over the course of the last several months. It's what the president said on the campaign trail as well. I'm not saying this is like an impeachable offense.
I mean, I'm not saying it's a big deal. I mean, it's probably fine, actually. We're lied to by you all the time. We're okay with that. I just want you to acknowledge that you became more precise.
Some grand indictment, but it is a fact that the president said one thing that ended up being not true.
Ended up being not true.
Again, I dispute that's true. That is not true. The truth is that he wasn't in business with his son. The Republicans have been for years trying to make arguments.
Again, I'm not saying that he was in business with his son.
And over again, those have been refuted.
It's insane. Isn't it insane that we have to deal with this crap? And we can all see what's going on. Yeah, Biden lied about it. Biden lied about it. Why did he lie? Why is he covering it up? How hard would it be? So if Biden was telling the truth about all of this, wouldn't it be the easiest thing in the world to be like, yeah, look, I didn't financially benefit at all. As a dad, I got on the phone occasionally. I did talk to some of the people that my son was doing business with. I knew that would make my son happy, so I did that. But no, I didn't benefit in any way financially. How hard would that be? And then he would be, he's subjected to some more scrutiny about that. Wait a second, aren't you abusing your office? That kind of thing. But he doesn't even go there. He doesn't even attempt. He just says, it's all lies. I've never talked to any of them. I don't know any of them. My son never made money from China. Everything is a lie with this guy. It's the most reflexive thing he does. It's completely untrue. He clearly made money from China. Clearly. Hunter made money from China. That's the bar we're talking about. But back during the 2020 debates, this is what Joe Biden said.
A single thing, number one. Number two, the guy who got in trouble in Ukraine was this guy trying to bribe the Ukrainian government to say something negative about me, which they would not do and did not do because it never, ever, ever happened. My son has not made money in terms of this thing about, what are you talking about, China. I have not had, the only guy who made money from China is this guy.
I mean, right? Open and shut lie. Not even close. A complete lie from Biden. One of thousands he has told, but in particular on this story. And the White House out today saying, yeah, no, he's never been in business with his son. All right, so anyway, the impeachment inquiry barrels along. Meanwhile, Jill Biden is trying to distract everybody from all of this. She put together a big Christmas party this week. You weren't invited to it, obviously. It was only for the freakiest people she could possibly find who don't like white people, it turns out. They actually listed on their website. So if the White House was trying to vet the group for its acceptability to represent the United States of America, they may have missed the part where they hate cops and white people on the website, or they just endorsed that view. Either way, the details ahead on the Vince Coglianese Show coming up. I didn't realize Karinge actually did get a question from Stephen Nelson today about Biden lying about business associates. Here's that exchange.
The impeachment inquiry, the House of Representatives voted last night to formally authorize the impeachment inquiry that started in September. For a lot of people at home who only view this in very broad strokes, could you explain to people why the president interacted with so many of his relatives, foreign associates, and why he continues to deny any interaction? How should people think about this?
Well, let's be very clear here.
Clear.
And I talked about this yesterday, and I'll talk about it a little bit more. And the president put out a statement yesterday that was very clear.
Very clear.
What we're seeing from House Republicans is wasted time.
Yeah, she says they should be working on securing the border instead. What a joke. What a joke this chick is. Anyway, that's what she was up to today. And did not answer the question at all. At all. Meanwhile, Jill Biden has tweeted out a video today. She has defaced the White House with, it looks like a bunch of drag queens, tap dancing drag queens. Maybe they're actual women. It's hard to tell in some cases. There's some edge cases in there, but they're all tap dancing around and There's a kind of a single camera shot that drags through the White House as everybody's dancing all over the place. All the clicking of heels you hear, that's tap dancing. So Jill says it's a bit of magic, wonder, and joy brought to you by the talented tappers of Durant's Dance, performing their playful interpretation of the Nutcracker Suite. Enjoy, she says. Oh, that's sweet. And then a couple of people on Twitter, to include Jeremy Carl over at the Claremont Institute, dug into Durant's Dance and discovered some unsurprising and unflattering things about them. They are radical, anti-white, racist, anti-police lunatics. They feature petitions on their public website to do, among other things, defund the police, stop ICE from poisoning immigrants, and a variety of other far-left causes. And it's endless. Defund the police, police de-escalation training, ban or restrict tear gas, let's see, fire racist criminal Michael Reynolds from the NYPD, defund and redistribute the NYPD, defund the MPD, defund the San Diego Police Department. And then they've got whole sections on their website dedicated to white privilege, systemic racism, white supremacy. Michelle Durrance, which is the radical founder of the group, touts the, quote, never-ending struggle against systemic racism and white supremacy on the website, and discusses her, quote, passion for revolutionary thought and how deeply embedded white supremacy, racism, and colonialism, that is our culture. The site also features prominent Communist Party member Angela Davis, the longtime radical left-wing activist, former member of the FBI's 10 Most Wanted. Yep, that's who the Bidens decided to turn the White House over to. Merry Christmas. Merry Christmas from Jill and the gang. Coming up, we'll be joined by Dr. Carol Swain. She's an academic, a senior fellow at the Institute for Faith and Culture, and she just had her work stolen by the president of Harvard. It just went public. We'll talk to her about that. Hey, good afternoon to you. 4:35 here, News Talk 105.9 WMAL, where we're making sense of the news. Coming up today, Chris Shandovel will be with us at 5 o'clock. Senior counsel at Alliance Defending Freedom. Big victory today for free speech and religious liberty in the Commonwealth as it relates to not being forced to use fake pronouns. It's so crazy. Chris will join us with that update. And then at 5:30, Kash Patel, former Trump administration officials, here to talk about how the government will continue to spy on Americans without any warrant, their consent, nothing like that. So that's continuing thanks to Congress. The details of that ahead. Now, you can also join us at 888-630-9625, 888-630-WMAL. Now, the president of Harvard is a woman by the name of Claudine Gay. And she's been in the news this past week for a couple of reasons. First and foremost, because she was one of a number of university presidents who couldn't say unequivocally that it would violate their campus code of conduct to call for the genocide of Jews. She said that, well, we would need to know the context before it violates the code of conduct. And so most people thought, well, that's insane. That's totally, how are you the president of Harvard? And then we found out after that it turns out much of her academic career, if you can call it that, she has been plagiarizing other actual scholars. And among them is my next guest. Dr. Carol Swain is here. She's a senior fellow for the Institute for Faith and Culture, and she joins us on the phone. Dr. Swain, nice to talk to you. Thank you so much.
Thank you. It's my pleasure.
It is. This must have been, so far this past week, a wild week for you. So you learned that you had some of your work stolen. And not only was it stolen, but it was stolen by somebody who's in a very powerful position, the president of Harvard. That's a big deal, isn't it?
It is. And the fact that she's the president of Harvard is a big deal, because I remember during the time I was at Princeton when she was all the talk. At that time, she was a student, but I mean, there was this hotshot person that did quantitative methods, and I heard all about her. I did not follow her career, and I did not realize, certainly, that she had listed passages from my prize-winning book without proper attribution. But when I looked at her subsequent publications, it was in the area where my book was considered the seminal work, that she was building on ideas, that she would have gotten from my book. And there's a citation, she has a citation or two in some of the articles, but she doesn't engage the work. It can be a string of citations, but my work was considered path-breaking, seminal. She was writing in the same area. So I feel that was very harmful to me, because in academia, your statute depends on how many citations you get. And so if someone's drawing on your work or building on your work, or it harms you if they don't acknowledge that.
And the way in which she plagiarized, it's from what I could see, the examples, I mean, she was either copying almost word for word sentences that came from your work, or changing them ever so slightly, but the phrasing was identical, without any quotation marks or any acknowledgement that she was lifting work from you and others, right?
Well, the last count, there were 27 instances. As far as my work, there are 2 instances, and the things that were barred were not, earth-shattering major findings. It was probably just laziness.
Right.
Involved. Yeah, and so it just seemed to be she had a pattern. We wouldn't want to excuse that for anyone, but if she had been some inner city kid from Detroit, or, like I was a high school dropout, didn't go to high school, somebody that had a disadvantaged background, you think, well, maybe she didn't learn maybe she didn't learn how to do this. But she went to the most elite boarding school in America, Phillips Exeter, and her undergraduate education was at Harvard. She won a prize for her senior thesis, and she won a prize for her dissertation. And I would imagine that she has probably been lifting things all of her career. People have looked at her dissertation. I don't know if they've looked at that senior thesis. So she's a fraud. All of this work seems to be fraudulent, and she's not being held accountable. And this is a person who's not a black descendant of slaves. Her parents are Haitians, comes from a strong middle-class family, and was able to go to the most elite boarding school in America. They cannot indict her because they would have to indict themselves. Harvard would have to indict themselves because that was her undergraduate school, and Phillips Exeter Academy would have to indict itself. She's a product of the elites, and so they're standing by her.
It is, but meanwhile, she's a product of the elites. But it seems that Harvard announced this week that they're protecting her. To your point, they are standing by her. That she's going to stay in the job. That they're going to petition some of these journals in order to change, quote, 4 corrections in 2 articles to insert citations and quotation marks that were omitted from the original publications. They consider this, I guess, just like a big mistake. Is it your impression that she's being protected, despite her elite status, because of her skin color? That seems to be the reason why they're doing this.
She's not being held accountable. Like, who gets to do a do-over? Can you imagine how many people that have been kicked out of schools and fired from their jobs for plagiarism, and they're allowing her to do a do-over? And some people are saying that plagiarism isn't really plagiarism. I think that what Harvard is doing is a disgrace, that they have chosen to protect its first ever black president. They see that as more important than protecting its already tarnished brand. So, I mean, that's what's going on, is they're trying to protect their first black president, who is clearly a DEI advanced person who really has not done any path-breaking work. As far as I can tell, she should not have been tenured ever in the Ivy League, because she didn't produce work to be tenured in the Ivy League.
But Dr. Carol Swain, if Harvard wanted to demonstrate that it was standing up for black achievement, why wouldn't they stand up for you in this instance? You're the one who did the work and had your work stolen. Shouldn't Harvard be standing up for you?
I mean, there was many more people than me that she borrowed from, but my beef has to do with more than just those two passages. Mine has to do with the fact that her whole research career, her early career, was in the area where my work was path-breaking, and she didn't engage the work. She didn't write in a way that she gave proper attribution. That's not plagiarism directly. That's something like stolen valor.
It's amazing, isn't it? What is going on with these institutions, Dr. Swain?
And I can tell you what some of it is. It's like, hey, I'm a country girl. I'm a mutt, and she's a purebred pedigree. And so I think that they prefer someone of their pedigree to someone, that may be kind of rough around the edges, that speaks with a funny accent. So I think it's social class as much as anything else.
Yeah, it's amazing
and
to
see.
And
I was not so impassioned. Initially, I was thinking, oh, well, she just made a mistake. Anyone can make a mistake. But then when more and more instances became public, it was clear that there was a pattern. And then when I actually read her work, I saw that she didn't engage my work or cite me the way that I thought she should have. But I don't just blame her. I would blame the system. I'd blame her colleagues. And I believe that she got advanced solely, because she was the right pedigree. I also believe it hurts every American, not just racial and ethnic minorities, because there are plenty of people who have worked very hard to attain the positions that they're in, and no one ever gives them a break. Why should this woman get so many breaks? She's not qualified to be the president of any university, much less Harvard.
Well, what is the message that it sends to the students on campus in terms of how they should conduct themselves as academics?
It doesn't just send a bad message to the students, where we learn that she herself was involved in suspending at least one student who had plagiarized, and that in the last year or two, I believe 27 students have been suspended for plagiarizing or punished for plagiarizing. But think about those middle school and high school students that English teachers are trying to teach how to properly document and how to write papers. If at Harvard University, which used to be considered a world-class university, if it's okay for their president to be a serial plagiarist, plagiarizer, I'm not sure what the correct expression is, but if that's okay, then it sends a signal that American education is just totally in the toilet.
Well, and it also makes the open inquiry and education a very dull process. We don't innovate, we don't learn new things. We just copy and steal from other people who've done work in the past. And that's not the way forward as a country, is it?
No, and I've had, at least one lawyer offer to take a case pro bono if I want to sue her. That's not my thinking at the time, but I'm pretty upset, and I do believe that she should resign. And I don't know if I would get over my being upset until they actually address the problem. And so far, they haven't seemed inclined to do so.
No. So my suspicion here, and thank you, Dr. Swain, for your time today. I really appreciate this. My suspicion here is Harvard is hoping for this all to die down. They basically said this week, she's not going anywhere. They're going to put up with the fact that there's going to be some conversations like the one you and I are having for a week or so. And their expectation is that they'll be able to ride this out and nobody will care, and they'll be able to look back and say, look, we didn't fire a black woman, so now we win. I mean, that's I think what they're planning.
Well, they didn't count on the Carol Swain factor and the fact that I'm one of those persons directly impacted, in some ways impacted more than the others, because many of the people she plagiarized from are on the faculty of Harvard or other elite institutions, and they're saying, oh, it's okay. I don't care that she borrowed my work. So they're giving her a free pass for taking their work. Well, I'm not giving her a free pass, and there's at least maybe 2 or 3 other people that are not going to give her a free pass. I don't think it's going to blow over as quickly as they think. And right now I have a bee in my bonnet, and I'm not inclined to let it go until justice pours down like a mighty river. And so, right now, I'm not willing to walk away from it. I realize that it will be old news, and so maybe there won't be interviews, but she'll be my poster child for DEI, and she will find her way in every talk I give about the subject.
Well, God bless you for it, because in the end, I think if you can hold this system accountable, it's going to benefit all of us. So keep that bee in your bonnet, and thank you so much, Dr. Carol Swain. Really appreciate your time today.
Thank you.
Good to talk to you. Isn't it amazing? So there you go. She puts in the work. She's got her work stolen from her. And the person who stole it's now the president of Harvard. And the signal that Harvard just sent is, hey, that's A-OK. That's A-OK. Whether it's if you satisfy the DEI regime, you can get away with it, whatever it is. The message that they're sending to students at these institutions is crystal clear. Just fake it till you make it, baby. Lois is in Purcellville calling in on line 2. Lois, good afternoon. You're on the Vince Coglianese Show. Hello.
Hi, Vince. First, I love your show. I try to listen to it as often as possible, but I, too, have a PhD. I got it about the same time as the Harvard Dr. Gay, and I think that Dr. Swain is being just too kind, because in the days that we got it was right after the dinosaurs, but we did have things like endnotes that automatically, it was so easy to cite if you wanted to cite.
Yeah.
You didn't have to do what we used to have to do. And so she's being too kind. I think it was just plain theft. I don't think it was laziness.
And when Dr.
And I do.
And when Dr. Swain says, that it's all important to get citations. In fact, like much of your career and everything, you're judged on to what extent your work is the source through which understanding flows. That's a big deal, right, Lois?
It's a big deal. It's how you get your promotions. It's how you get hired. It's a huge deal. And, and plus, quite honestly, you work really hard at it, and you want to be recognized.
Yes.
I worked for the year and a half of my dissertation putting it together after I got to negative. And people did stole from me. I'm not complimenting. Just give me the credit. And it's just too easy to do the citations these days. So
yeah.
If you do it once or twice, I can understand it. But if you have a background where you've been trained how to do it, it's very sad. It makes me very sad that DEI's brought us to this point where, and I have to admit, I've seen it myself in other situations. I actually interviewed somebody who I was hiring, had a beautiful dissertation, and then I realized I knew somebody who didn't even change the title.
Oh, my goodness. Oh, my goodness.
I hate to say it, but, it's a sad state when the president of Harvard, and, well, actually more than her, their trustees are not smart enough to say, I'm sorry, you got to go somewhere else.
I know.
That's it. I mean, I just want to say that it's too easy to cite these days, so it isn't laziness.
I just expect better from the president of Harvard. That's all, or at least I should have. I did in the past.
You would think,
You would think. Lois.
Quite honestly, a community college, maybe not so much.
Yeah, well, I'll tell you what. We don't do PhD academic papers here, but when people say if we're not for double standards, there'd be no standards at all. They'd have no standards at all. I say instantly, I'm like, that's a Chris Plant line. Everyone needs to know. My citations are crystal clear. I give everyone credit who deserves it, and Chris deserves credit for a lot of great ideas.
And by the way, when you do that, I appreciate it because as I said, it's a compliment to the person and it's a compliment to yourself because you're smart enough to give credit where credit is due.
Yeah, I mean, come on. Come up with your own stuff. Hey, thanks very much, Lois. Really appreciate the call. Yeah, and coming up here in the next hour, we've got a bunch of great guests for you. We've got Alliance Defending Freedom attorney Chris Shandovel is going to be with us because the Virginia Supreme Court today handed down a big decision, what they're referring to as a sweeping victory for free speech and religious freedom. The Supreme Court moving to reinstate a lawsuit alleging that the West Point School Board in the Commonwealth violated high school teacher Peter Vlaming's rights when they fired him because he avoided using the made-up personal pronouns of an entitled little brat in the school. And so they fired him. And he said, wait a second, I have religious liberty here. I have free speech rights. I don't have to be forced to lie to a student. That's crazy. It is crazy. And the Supreme Court today said it's totally crazy. Joining us coming up will be that attorney. He'll explain. It's ahead on the Vince Coglianese Show.